On the next Education OG show, I have invited two guests who are highly seasoned educators. Who are they? They are Randy Johnson and Erica DiRenzo, and they're both from the great state of New Jersey, and they want to give their gift of experience and their knowledge and everything else they can to this platform. So thank you for thank you for Randy and Erica joining us today, and let's get into the conversation. And thank you to Randy and thank you to Erica for joining us today. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, we are the Education OGs, and we've got gifts for all the people out there listening today. Today, my guests are highly seasoned educators. Who are they? They're both out of Jersey, which is great. Shout out to Jersey. And they want to give some gifts, some nuggets and information to help everybody out here doing this work. So joining me today, I have Randall Johnson, as his name shows on the screen, though I know him as Randy. And I have Erica DiRenzo. Erica. And normally what I ask folks to do, and I ask you to do it, Erica, until Randy gets that camera situated, to just tell us about your career trajectory. Like, how'd you start off and where'd you land and what are you doing now? So go ahead and fill us in.
So I'm a 17-year-long educator at this point. I became a teacher by way of the alternate route.
Okay, yeah.
I always knew I would become a teacher. Even in high school, I had a very good friend, a guy friend actually, who told me, you should teach. And that really stuck with me because I was tutoring other people at the same time, just the same. So when I got into education, my goal was to teach fourth grade. I just remember I was just like, okay, that's a very competitive slot for those of us who want to be in elementary ed, right? And I was like, I would be a phenomenal fourth grade teacher and I want to be the pinnacle of that. So I wanted to be a fourth grade teacher. And I would literally pray for that, right? And then I got to be a fourth grade teacher and then I got to move all the way around. So to date, I've taught preschool to college. And I also tutored students on the doctoral level, just the same. I went into career development while teaching in higher ed, pursued a master's in part that had a concentration centered around that. So I could then help students develop an idea of like career readiness, career awareness, where their gifts and talents would naturally lead them. I found I struggled in college. I changed my major 7 times.
Oh, okay. You
right?
Working that out.
Right. I changed my major 7 times. And what I learned through those experiences is I was going to a college that had no career center. They had counselors at best who were not career ready. They weren't career professionals, right? So they couldn't guide me and instruct me on like next steps, next classes, internships, where would be some places that you might want to begin substituting or guest teaching, as I would like to say, to open up opportunities for you to get a teaching position. So it amounted to me changing my major 7 times. I think that's really crucial for people to know because failure is a really big part of making it to whatever's going to be your beautiful success, right? We're this beautiful.
And let me pause you right there. You can't say you did 7 major changes and not help us listen to the tones. Did you go from, did you go from psychology to, engineering? Like, how did it go?
So at first I was a nursing major and that went very well. Okay. Until it got to times that it was about to be like rotation. And I'm like a very empathic person. Okay. So I made a decision for my own self, an executive decision, because it's my life, my destiny. Right. That wasn't going to be an ideal path for me. I'd considered midwifery because I'm really excited about women's healthcare and Black women in particular, having high quality healthcare during pregnancies, after pregnancies, and being treated with a level of equity. I know what it feels like to be a Black woman, to go into a doctor's office and feel like you're a blob. They don't even have research around you. They don't have enough research around us surrounding genetics, pharmacology, across the spectrum in medical care. So I wanted to be that person that stood in the gap. Then I went to psychology. Then I went to, I can't remember, was it office sciences? It was a bunch of different things like that I was
This is all at the same, this is at the same institution?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm a naturally talented person in a lot of different areas. I was required to be a very avid reader. And so I went to the library. My dad was like, you're gonna have a library card. And I was that kid there on Saturdays with the library books, talking to the librarians and forging real relationships. And y'all might laugh. So anybody listening on here, some of the best relationships I ever had were with librarians. When I got to college, you can't do all this research. I don't care what anybody says. If you have relationships with librarians, they can look up information for you and supply you with timely sources, white papers, right? Yeah. Hard to find information because that's their job.
That's right.
Is to excavate that knowledge, that insight, and that up-to-date information. And talk to a librarian. They just want you to talk to them and engage them, Lord. So please do. So anyway, it was all these different majors in between, right? And then I was like, you've always wanted to be a teacher. And I worked in the court system for years also. Okay. So when I was in the court system, it was very disheartening to see how many people from our community in the court system, repeat people coming in and out because they couldn't pay fines, going back to jail, fines are being added on. I noticed there was a gap of young Black men in particular who would come in, and the simplest things like, tucking in your shirt and those kinds of things. So I would just talk to them and say in between court sessions, maybe these are some things that'll give you a better feel for yourself, and it'll give you a presentation that may render a different outcome. We know those things aren't fair.
But that's what you want, right? You want an outcome like, you got to stop. We have to stop. It's like, all right, you understand when you play chess, there's rules in chess. You could call something whatever else you want to call it, but the fact is you're on a chessboard. You can only move the way you can move. So I'm with you on that. It ain't.
But you got to know.
It's like knowing where you are.
But you got to know chess too, like in all fairness, right? Yeah. Doing something to survive is different than doing something because you want to, right? And that's a big difference, right? That's a differentiator between Black and white people and outcomes that we're looking for, and outcomes they may naturally just come by because they've these built-in blessings, right? Built-in privileges, right? So after that, I was just like, I just want to help more of us not go through the preschool to prison pipeline. So I was like, I'm gonna, continue on this teaching track. And I did. Okay. And I'm glad. And I'm really glad. And I'm glad I got to teach everything. To be honest with you, my favorite is college, if you would like to know. Yeah. I love the high order thinking. I love the rigor. Yeah. I love the adult content. And I loved it all, trust me, along the way. There's beauty in everything, but I really love, because I'm a geek. I really like, I really like to be like, you know what? That's my way of starting into something, right?
It's either that or actually. Actually is the geeks, it's the ace of the geek. Like, okay, that's cool, but actually, let me put you on to the truth.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of things in education, and I'm really grateful that I chose that path, to be perfectly honest with you. And a lot of us do. And for me, it was a ministry. It still is a ministry. I'm always going to be a teacher.
Yep. Yeah, and it resonated with me when you spoke about loving to work with the college students. And I think the thing for me specifically, I don't know if it's the same for you, is just, it's a little selfish, but you get the reward a lot. The return is a lot quicker in college because you see them apply the thing that you may have, little information or tool or strategy, and they apply it and it works, and they come back and tell you. And for me, I'm like, yeah, it worked. I get that at the, the K to 12 level, it's a delay. I posted a picture on Facebook the other day, and it was like, I saw a student of mine just happened to be security in the mall out in King of Prussia, and he looked at me and he was like, you look familiar. And I get that a lot, and Randy probably does too, and you probably have, Erica. It's students remember you, and
Oh, yeah.
you don't even remember the impact you had on them unless they tell you, because you're just doing that work. And like, he was an elementary school student that later became a high school student, and I just thought, ah, whatever. But then clearly there was an impact. He remembered me enough to, and I had a mask on, and he could still recall who I was. So it's a delayed impact. But you know, the college, if I were to say high school, I haven't taught or worked at a college level, but I could believe that that's almost like hitting racquetball. You know, it's like you hit the wall and it comes right back. You're like, all right, that worked. So I get that. Randy, you ready to jump in?
Yeah, I don't have my video.
All right. So
But
Randy,
you can hear me? You can hear me?
we can hear you. We can hear you. So tell us about your career. Like, how'd you jump in this world, and you know, what makes you so passionate right now to do this work in education?
Wow, yeah. Randy Johnson's the name, Randall Johnson's the government name. But I've been a 25-year educator, mostly in urban schools, and I've loved every minute of it. Loved every minute of it. It's just a passion of mine. I could do anything, like either of us, any of us could have chosen to do anything. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of college, and ended up substitute teaching. And then I was just hooked in the school, working with young people. And I gravitated towards middle school. And at that time, I had just, finished Rutgers, and I was on the track team. So I was still pretty fast.
The Rutgers.
And yeah, and I love to challenge kids in all types of ways, especially, in sports. And that's sort of like a connection I had with a lot of these kids. And at middle school age, they were ready to go either way. I'm ready to, jump, I'm ready to drop out of 8th grade and sell drugs, or I'm ready to maybe stay and maybe continue with the track program and see what can happen. So I was always challenging kids, meeting people. It's just a passion of mine. As far as what I've done, elementary, middle, high school, and between jumping in and out of the classroom, I've been dean of students, which has probably been my most pleasurable position in education, because it allowed me to really get to know the parents, get to know the kids in the entire school. I wasn't contained to just one classroom. So one of the most interesting experiences in the inner city was definitely Newark, New Jersey, working next to Bradley Courts, one of the most notorious housing projects. And just as a dean, every morning having those problems from the night before come into the school. And I've always said those problems don't walk in the suburban schools. They just don't. Kids are coming in sleep deprived, didn't have dinner, and something dramatic happened, and I have to deal with it, and so it's still something I love to do. And but I am ready to transition on to something different, and that's the we can talk about that later, is the diversity, equity, inclusion space.
Okay. Excellent. Let me give y'all some applause, see if my little button works.
Okay.
Will be louder than that. Come on, crank it up. All right, shout out to both of you. All right, so let's get into it. I got a few questions, and these questions just kind of help people see where we are and what we're doing and who you are and how you lend your expertise to the space. So, all right, I'll start with the basics, honestly, because you can't know where you're going unless you know where you came from, and without a guide, you are just lost. So for both of you, who is your greatest influence on you being who you are today?
I'll go first. Definitely my grandmother, Nana, who would have been 113 years old this year. She was a fantastic woman, lived next door to me, and was always steering me in the right direction, no matter what it was. And it's someone who probably will always be besides my son, she'll probably be almost my favorite person of all time. She just really guided me as far as work ethic. A little plug for my grandfather. He was like, never be late, because that's one thing as a Black man they can never take away from you. They can never hold that against you. So I'm Jay knows I'm always half an hour early to something, you know. So that's it, Nana,
Yes, sir.
113 years old,
Mhm.
and that's her.
Okay.
Erica?
I would have to say it was my dad, definitely. He's the one that, um, well, my mom bought me my first set of books at home at my dad's insistence, right? And then I was required to read a book a day. And he made sure I got a library card. And then he did something really exceptional that I feel changed my life tremendously. And that was when the summer I was 8 years old. So I had to read a book a day, look up a new word a day, present the book on a book report, write a book report, and then learn that new word, share what the word was, write it in a sentence and a paragraph, and be able to do an illustration about what the word meant, right? And I am a wordsmith. And I have a,
I'm shaking my head, not my head, because I'm like, I'm gonna get to that later, because that's parents. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have a deep love and a deep love and admiration for words. So much so that when I got into high school, so I always loved to read books, all kinds of books, all kinds of writers, especially Black writers. But when I got into high school, I was able to take Shakespeare, and blessed to have my first Black teacher ever, Mrs. Washington, who I will say for later. But she was a tremendous influence on me. So my dad, I would say, steering the way for that, in terms of me being like a lover of books and one that appreciated words. And I would say, I would pretty much say there were a number of people in small ways that impacted me, but mostly I would say it would be my dad. And I didn't want to disappoint him. And he was radical for me. And he definitely made it known. He was that one adult that was crazy for me. And I always love that.
It's like you're reading this script I got here.
Okay.
Like you segueing. Oh man, so this is great because like everybody needs fuel from somebody. Nobody, and most of us, if not all of us, know no matter what you've achieved in life so far, it's probably somebody that has something to do with how you got there. Like you just never do it on your own. I don't care how great you think you are. There's someone like opens that door, someone put in a good word, and someone, you know, helped you get where you are. So that said, everybody needs cheerleaders. I preach this to people, the younger people, when I'm telling them to go out and build their portfolios. I'm like, find people that under all circumstances will always sing your praises regardless. And when people ask them questions about you, you'll be able to say nice things, as long as they're accurate, right? You don't lie or do it for fluff's sake, but the point is have people to sing your praises so that, you know, it gives you opportunities, because people find it hard to say nice things about themselves. You know, as we all know, if someone asks you in that interview, like, tell me why you deserve this job, and it's kind of hard, like, I don't know, because I'm great. But anyway, who are your cheerleaders? You know, who are the cheerleaders on your team that help promote, you know, who you are as a person?
Randy, you want to go or you want me to go?
My cheerleaders are my siblings. You know, I feel bad for my son, he's an only child, but my siblings have always been my cheerleaders. And a few administrators along the way have looked out for me because they saw my work ethic.
And
they
yeah,
were
I
like,
should have been clear. I meant in a professional space. I'm sorry. Where?
professional space. Okay, yeah. There's been a few administrators who have helped me along. I remember an old guy, Dr. Greya, 20 years ago, who just was a nice guy.
Granville,
And yeah, whatever I asked him to do, I need this recommendation. Do you know this person? And he would always just stop. He was like a big, jolly old Santa Claus guy. And you know, he's probably no longer with us now, but I just remember him always just giving a kind word and saying, don't worry about what people are going to say about you. You're tough, you can do it. Just kind words. And so that carried me a long way.
Shout out to Dr. Gray. I remember Dr. Gray from Granville. Yep. Real gentle spirit, and a just very peaceful guy. You know, when I if I could, just for a moment, I remember when we did professional development at Granville, it was like 4th month or whatever, and all the kids, you remember, Randy, how it was at Granville, it would be kind of crazy. And so he used me as an example, and I was young and, you know, kind of like, oh, I'm not doing anything special. But he said, when I go in Mr. Kamal's class, he was like, I can't remember specifically what he said. He either said something like, he said he either has a high threshold for pain or he's doing something good in his classroom. And it just resonated with me that he could see, like it stuck with me, like, oh, he saw what I was doing, because he knows the population we work with. And he was like, he's either got a high threshold for pain or he's doing something right. And again, that's the kind of encouragement he gave. So, you know, shout out to him. All right, Erica, who are your cheerleaders?
So there were two in higher ed. So I knew I wanted to teach higher ed. And I always tell my students, right, you have to think about like, there's only six people between every person, right? So I had to think about like, how was I going to make this happen, right? So I literally called the college one day and got Dr. Avon Chapman, may he reign in power always, on the phone. Just picked up the phone and he picked up and answered, and we got into a conversation. And I said, I'd really like to teach college. And he said, tell me why, right? And I did. And then I applied, and then he brought me in. And then ultimately that led to an opportunity of me being able to teach in the English department in college, which is what, you know, that's something I'm very, you know, excited about, very passionate about. It was just amazing. He also had an undergrad in English too, so we really clicked in that way.
Yes.
So he opened up an opportunity for me to be there and provided me with the ability to be able to really get in that department and not just any department, right? Then that led to me being able to teach in the social department, and then I was able to teach like incoming freshmen college skills. So he really opened up that door and was a tremendous support, right? When I taught in the English department, I would have to say my department chair was an amazing person as well for me. And I'll get to her, I'm making sure her last name didn't change. She was amazing because she also, I remember the first semester I taught, she did a handwritten thank you card to all the instructors, and she thanked me for having an excellent first semester, and that all, and the way that I made students feel seen, right? And I was really grateful for that, like you said about this other man, because she had visited me like once maybe, right? But the feedback that she was getting and the kind of efforts that she was making to build that relationship with me, she had confidence in me, and she had confidence in the people who reported back to her. So I'm really grateful for that. And then I would say Leah Coleman. And Leah Coleman is a Philadelphia educator who is a principal. And I was a teacher coach in her building. And so I coached her teacher to grow their professional development capacity, right? And I had an idea, you know, a crazy idea. Let's make this thing all the way culturally competent.
How about
I had a crazy idea before it was popular, trendy, or cute, right?
Right.
Okay. And she was like, yeah, girl, let's just go with it. And I mean, when I tell you we did the thing between me, her, and Mrs. Hamilton, the librarian, y'all gonna have to give me a minute for this one, right? So we got the librarian to do the bilingual books, right? We all worked together on this stuff, right? And culturally competent books for the library. Anybody in the city of Philadelphia knows that libraries and schools are like deserts, like food deserts.
Yeah.
In, you know, in historically excluded communities, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So to have a thriving library, very much to the credit, all the credit due to Mrs. Hamilton for that, right? And to be able to collaborate with her about growing the bilingual books. She was bilingual as well, so that was also a plus for us.
Excellent.
And then I worked with the teachers, begrudgingly so. I'm going to be very honest. There's a lot of pushback to get the culturally competent, what they call ethnodiversity books, right? In the school, in the classroom libraries, and then pedagogical books that also reflected cultural competency, cultural pedagogical practices, everything that would make a school more equitable for students is something she allowed me space to do, right? And I was really excited about doing it. So I worked on the pedagogy, the curriculum. I dealt with the teachers, and there was a lot of lot of pushback, a lot of dissatisfaction. Quite honestly, there was a lot of white discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a preference for the white body bias, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Respectfully, I'm not going to say that.
You don't even have to say respectfully.
That's
Yeah.
why I said I'm striking
you don't
that.
have to say that.
That's why I'm saying I'm striking that. And I had uncomfortable conversations where I brought my bravest self to this bold challenge, where I confronted teachers about their internalized views on Black children, Black people, about what they saw as crime.
There we go.
There we go, right? And ultimately, how they, saw these children and they were reflecting back to the children. We worked hard for not just year round, but Black History Month, just the same, making sure the teachers didn't cover the only 5 people that always get covered, right? But bringing in people who resisted the system of chattel slavery.
Right.
Bringing in inventors and doctors and other African empires and dynasties, right? Making sure that circle time and story time was carved out intentionally for children to see books that were children that were disabled, that were bilingual, making sure that every student in the building felt as seen as they could be, making sure that kids had opportunities to have work, if you will. So there were some kids that I put to work in the building to help me build those rich classroom libraries that would be ethnically diverse.
Okay.
And they got some work experience, and Mrs. Hamilton and I put together a program where we took the older children and taught them like the Dewey Decimal System.
How about those? Yeah, well, librarians. Yeah, I remember. That was
Right?
a thing because you had to get it right because you I gotta make sure everything is what it is. I'm about to go up to the 6th floor and go find this. Yep. There was no Google. I remind people there was no Google.
No, but that was, that's a vital skill that they need. And very much to the credit of the school system in Philadelphia, high school students pushed into our building as well. Okay. And so my principal allowed me to commandeer alongside of her to put those students to work. So I trained those students how to do early literacy testing, tests for phenomes, tests for the alphabet test, do letter drills, sound drills. They would bring me daily assessments. I taught them how to grade them. I taught them how to model language acquisition for children. And then ultimately, I mean, these kids at the end of the school year, me and Mrs. Hamilton could get, and the principal too, could give them, if she decided, usually it was me, would give them a letter of recommendation, right? So when they went on to their next college career readiness and awareness set, like wherever they were going to be in the city of Philadelphia as a high school student, they could show them that they had an excellent track record.
Yes. Like bringing your squad with you in a way. Yep. Okay.
So those are some things. Thank you for allowing me, because I'm incredibly proud of doing that. And actually, I worked for an organization at that time in the city of Philadelphia who gave me a tremendously difficult time. Okay.
Was it worth it?
And let me tell you something. We're worth it. Like Cornel West said, you don't love Black people just to love on them. You love them because they're worthy. Okay. Right. And so our children are worthy, as all Black people are worthy. And I want to say this, the organization I worked for completely modeled my model.
They saw a good thing and they took it.
Yep. Yep.
I ain't mad as long as it's put to, give it to the people that need it. The people that need it. So, all right. Go ahead.
That needs to stop happening though, right? Because at the end of the day, intellect is property just the same. Right. I'm grateful that the children that were in our building benefited, and the teachers that were able to experience the training just the same, despite much pushback. Much pushback. The construct of whiteness is kind of like, how do I say this? It's not fragile if everything is built around it to sustain it, to fortify it, and to insulate it.
It's just hollow. Yeah.
Absolutely, but it is real because the pushback was like insane. We're like, okay, so we actually fighting over learning how to, teach children the accurate history of what happened. We're actually not going to recognize that this child needs this book to feel represented in the classroom. We're going to actually push back on the fact that this child may not, like Randy was saying, came into school tired, but have you talked to the parent? Have you talked to the caretaker? Did you talk to the child and, just share whatever their night was like? I remember having a conversation with a teacher once about a kid that didn't have a desk. And I was like, okay, so in my lifetime, I had a desk. So I was like, I get it, but do they have a table? And she was like, no, they don't even have a table. And I'm like, well, there's bigger fish to fry. So like, certainly we need to reach into these parents and see what we can do to help them. It wasn't an opportunity to be judged. It was an opportunity to be compassionate.
Okay. I love that. All right, I got a couple more and then we'll wrap up. There's so many good questions. I want to see which one I should pick. Ooh.
I'm down. I'm down.
All right. All right. So we are all now seasoned and experienced, and we've been through a whole lot for a number of years. If you could teleport back and be the guardian angel for you when you first got into education, what would you say to that person? What would you say to young Erica? What would you say to young Randy who got their certifications and felt like they were going to change the world? What would you say to them?
Randy, you start because I had a long answer the last time. It was worthwhile. It was long.
Well, I was definitely different back then than I am now. Back then, I was definitely more reckless. In the classroom, just because I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to follow the rules. And I still probably wouldn't have changed that, because that's who I am.
But you can whisper in Randy's ear. You can whisper in Randy's 2001, 2002 ear as he goes off, like give him the secret.
The secret for me to do better, to do more, to do different for me?
Or just what would you tell him to get an advantage, right? To be the most impactful of, like, if it was me and I was like, what would I tell Jermaine in 2001 that would help him catapult without, any fear or whatever he had? What would I whisper in his ear? That's what I want you to think about.
I don't know. That's a tough one.
Okay, come back.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to revisit this thing that I was talking to you about before, about a woman who was greatly supportive of me. She actually was my college professor.
Okay.
And her name was Denise Coulter. Her name is Denise Coulter, and she's the dean of liberal arts education at Atlantic Cape Community College. And so, I struck up a conversation with her, and she gave me an opportunity to teach in that department. And I'm just so grateful for her. Like, she remembered me being a student, but she transitioned. She treated me like a whole adult, right? And she respected me to know to do what I was being put in position to do. And she appreciated what I was doing. And I was working with my students with a lot of Black books. I was talking a lot of Black consciousness, right? I taught Michael Brown in my classroom. I taught about Black Lives Matter. I taught about Tamir Rice. I taught about the intersectionality of the Harlem Renaissance and the Black women that came out of that era. And this is a white woman. And she supported me in doing that in a way that wasn't like, yay, I'm an ally or an advocate. It wasn't performative. It was purely authentic. Right. And she really felt like I had a voice with those students, and she protected me to have the space to do that. And I'm truly grateful to her for that.
All right, so this is a question that I speak about this stuff all the time to people, and sometimes when I say these things, I know it could kind of sound a little crazy. Like I would say to friends or whoever, I take this the way it's respectful, but you gotta kind of see it. So we have to get a driver's license in order to operate a car, right? We need a teacher's license to teach. Everybody needs these licenses to interact with the things in their community. But parents don't have to get themselves licensed to be parents, right? They just have to kind of engage in an activity that will produce something. So a lot of people, well, you know this over years, everybody is parental engagement, parental involvement. You know, you hear that over and over again, but you can't seem to really get this exemplar where like there's this school where the parents are super involved and you can model that anywhere. So as teachers compare about parents and blame them, as you know, whoever blames teachers, do parents need some type of academy, right, to become better parents? Like, do parents need someone to teach them how to do this with their children in school? Because when you're in school, when you have kids in school, you're leaving your most precious things, cargo, DNA, to others, hoping they're going to do whatever needs to be done to help uplift, you know, edify and improve that kid. But you don't really know if that's happening, and maybe they don't even look like your kid or care. Do parents need a better, in my opinion, parents need a better understanding of how a school works and the power that they have to improve schools and how to take action? Because I think far too many parents just think, I'll do nothing until something happens, and then I'll threaten to sue the school, however, you know, whatever, moving forward. So again, the basic question I have for both of you is there a parent academy that is needed to help us improve our situation for students that look like us in schools?
I'm gonna say absolutely, and I'll give an example.
Mm-hmm.
I followed this guy for many years. His name's Jeffrey Canada,
Mm-hmm.
out of the Harlem Zone in New York.
Yep.
And
Harlem Children's Zone. Yep. Yep. Yep.
they have classes, an academy for parents, for the woman who is pregnant. They have to come in the morning and they can get, there's a nurse there, there's a nutritionist there. And I think the vision is definitely, we want that unborn child to stay with Harlem Zone until they graduate. And we know how important prenatal care is and talking to the child in the womb, and that's where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish there were more institutions that have implemented this type of program, because it absolutely is successful in Harlem Zone. It does work. It has worked. They've shown the statistics. And yeah, I think it should be nationwide academies for parents. I mean, like I said, going back urban city, Newark, Trenton, Baltimore, Washington, DC, it's been real sad to see how parents act when they come into a school. Or also, lots of parents in the city don't know how to advocate for themselves. And I think that's important. So that's what I have to say about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Randy and I were like, this is why we're friends, right? This is why we're friends, because I'm like sitting here jotting down some things. Instead of calling it like an anti-poverty campaign, it would be for me like what did I put down? Can I read my own writing? I cannot read my own writing. This is ridiculous. It would be like
your head. You just gotta.
I wrote it down and I literally can't read. It would be like a societal enrichment, if you will. So Dr. King talked about the three evils, if you will, the trifecta: militarism, poverty, and racism, right? So if we're focusing on historically excluded communities, we know the part that poverty, militarism, right, and certainly racism plays, right? So very much to like what Randy's point is, like I would work on food security with enrichments, right, for them. And then monthly stipends. Dr. King talked about that. In fact, in his neighborhood in Georgia, right where he lived, they're giving monthly stipends to Black women to the tune of $850 a month, right? That's people's pressing needs for rent, for food, for healthcare, that pays down debt, that helps people build up a financial safety net so they have savings. Mental health, social workers to work with parents, right? So I think it is a bootstrap effort, right? Where it begins from like the womb all the way up until, but there has to be like this encompassing, like love and arms wrapped around this community that understands that, poor, historically excluded communities their parents aren't necessarily participating because, and I've struggled, right? I put myself through college with 2 kids as an adult, right? It took me a long time to get through college because I got married young and had 2 kids, right? No regrets there. But there were many times I was choosing between the electric bill and a book. Let me be clear.
Mhm,
And being an English major sounds cheap, but it's not. One of my books was $300,
mhm.
right? So choosing between like tuition, books, food, utilities, kids' tuition, ballet lessons, car note, right? All competing priorities. People can be present to parent, right? But it is their access to having the privilege, if you will, to be able to parent effectively in a way that isn't interrupted by other competing priorities.
Mhm. Do you think but isn't it the parents, or if I'm engaging in activity that's going to produce life and that life's going to wind up in a public school, where does my responsibility lie as a parent to ensure that I've chosen the most appropriate public school with
Mhm,
all the things that we know, we've been in the building, we know what it's supposed to look like.
mhm.
But we also know some parents just kind of treat it like go into that space and then come back smarter. Go into that space and then come back, with habits that are going to promote success for you in the future. And we know many of them are just like, go in that space and then be there until I get back later on because I'm doing me.
Mhm.
I don't know if we're doing a good job of working with parents. I don't know if parents are doing a good job of understanding school law and understanding what their rights are and allowing their kids to be pushed into special ed situations. I don't think parents are as plugged in as they need to be. And, I don't know the answer right now, but I still feel like, we are just allowing folks to push Black families through a system that's already been designed to work in a certain way by making you feel like you have this agency and it's going this way, but really it's a mousetrap, right? Where you're gonna end up when it's over.
Right.
It's just information. I think it's anecdotal what I'm saying, but I feel like people just, I got a kid, I'm gonna send them to the local school and then they're gonna work it out. But no, it's your responsibility. And it's your responsibility to really provide education. The school itself is going to give you some Western structural, positions that you need to take in order to fit. But like, where does the real education begin? Is it just within the school?
No, I don't think so at all. But I also, I know that home is a huge part of it, right? My home was supportive. My dad was great. He loved books. He was smart. He wanted me to be smart. And he always told me, you're smart, right? So like, I love that, right? And I know that home life is important. I know that extended family, especially in our communities, having that extended family is a rich experience as well. However, when we're talking about the schools that we've largely worked in, right, that doesn't mean that people don't love their children or their families aren't doing the best that they can. There's so many other competing factors. Do you have family who's incarcerated, for instance, right? Or a family member who recently returned from jail, for instance, right? How many generations have been incarcerated, right? It doesn't mean that parents ideally should not be involved, educated, informed, understand, to your point, what an IEP is or what it means when a kid actually gets classified. Absolutely. But we also know that they don't always have the opportunity, some of these parents, right, to really get in there and push up their sleeves and learn all of these things because they have so many other things that they're working on. Like they're working on that month's rent. They're working on feeding their kid that night. They're working on like, is my kid safe right now? Right.
And I'm going to push back because that's what
That's fine.
I want to push back and say to your point, Erica, like I've been telling my kids this, right? I tell them now the world does not owe you any type of understanding. Like everybody doesn't need to know all your background. It may sound ideal, like that everybody knows your circumstances and adjusts accordingly. But if you enter into life thinking like, well, I got this luggage, and I'm not saying you said this, but it just reminded me of something I've heard. I've got all these things, I'm this minority, I'm that minority, I'm this statistic, I'm that statistic. Consider that when I interact with you, and I'm telling my children, no one really cares about all that. You can keep pushing that, and it may make you feel better if you don't reach what you're trying to achieve. Then you certainly got a number of excuses you can use to say why you didn't get there. But what if the position is, yep, this is exactly who I am, this is exactly what I'm up against, and this is what I need to do, instead of, and I'm not saying you said this,
Mhm.
But we don't want parents saying, well, you are a checkbox minority. Go in there with that on your chest and hope someone lets you in. It should be, you are all these boxes, so you need to operate in this way so you don't let these things hold you back. Because, and I've said this to my daughter and my son specifically, like, nobody wants to hear that the reason you can't do something is because something else happened to you in the past. It's not their responsibility. And so I try to use that approach when discussing this, right? How do you find a balance between, yep, this stuff exists and I got to deal with it, and I can't do it because, these oppressive, forces are pushing me.
So I think, we all share these concerns, all three of us here, right? And we all have a love of education and children. I would even say Black children, right?
Absolutely.
Much respect for Black children, the Black family, right? Holding things down in our communities, right? Loving them, right? And I have found that the greatest thing I can do is activate something in a student, right? Having these individual mentorship relationships, individual custom tailored conversations, following up, providing feedback and support and praise. I find that that's really important. I hear everything that you're saying, right? But it is also from a seat of privilege, okay? Your education, your maleness, right? Thinking about all the things, I don't know what kind of family life you came from, but you do have some background in terms of having some.
Check all the negative ones.
Okay, well, you somewhere down the line, you got some values in you that you felt were core to your success, right? So those are some things that provide you with a lens in which to look at life through, right? And, can we really fault children if they don't have the adults in their place to help them build those core values? And I like to call it build a war chest, if you will, right? So I think that's important to have those individual conversations that I've had with any number of students from like pre-K to college. And those are the things I find have been very impactful, where they do come back and they see, hi, Mr. Renzo, remember when you said, or you wrote a letter for me, or thank you for that encouragement. That's what I find, right? But I'm also not going to indict people who were born into a system that was designed to fail them and rigged, right, to their demise, right? And ultimately you get entrapped in this system, right? We talked about that briefly. You kind of talked about like the labyrinth, and it leads to from the preschool to the prison pipeline, right? And that's absolutely true, right? That's a real thing, but I want to hold space for all those systems, those oppressive systems in place, purposely by design put there to make sure that that happens, right? And I want to more importantly, I want to hold space for the people who that thing is designed to come for. Right? And I want to make sure that I understand that if people were equipped, qualified, and capable with families that didn't have such intergenerational trauma, money deficits, mental health disparities, in the city of Philadelphia, that money's going over to Cheltenham, right? To build up their war chest for their students. So when I'm thinking about like how schools get defunded, like in Philly, they get defunded to go to white communities, right? And nobody's raised an eyebrow about that for years. Okay, so there's so many things working against Black children, Black families, Black communities, and I'm going to hold space for those people, and I'm going to root for them. I know that there's room to still do better, but there also needs to be a way to make it better for them so they can be equipped to do better. And the best way I feel like I can impact that situation is having a face-to-face, heart-to-heart, breast-to-breast conversation. I know all my kids' names, right? Whether I'm teaching preschool, college, whatever. And when I was in elementary, like school in Philly, I would be outside when the kids would come in the morning. I would greet them by their name. Some would come on bikes, some would walk, some would be buzzed. How y'all doing today? And it meant something. I knew their names. And at the end of the day, my office was open. And the kids would, in my office was in the library, and I left my door open. They would come in and read to me.
Yes.
And their parents, they would say, oh, this is Mr. Renzo. I want you to meet. They called me Miss T. This is Miss T. I want you to meet Miss D. And I found that that was a really, all my career long, right? I've always had that thing where I could talk with people.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Even little children are very responsive to me. And still to this day, I get kids who reach into me. Last summer, I used to teach a girl who was white presenting Latina.
Mhm.
And she always had to correct people and tell people like, no, I'm Hispanic, I'm a Latina.
Okay.
And I remember last summer when the protests and the, all the protests were going on and there was all this upheaval all over the country, and rightfully so. I remember she sent me a text and she thanked me for teaching her who she was. We had lessons on like how the policing is rooted in the slave patrols, right? And how the police system is set up by how the police system is set up by design to go feral on Black bodies, but not white bodies, right? And how the casualty killing law allowed for white women to murder their husbands' children that were the product of rape. And then that clause was then further extended that in correction of your enslaved person, you took their body into custody. And if you happened to kill them, you couldn't be prosecuted because they were resisting your correction, resisting arrest. And she, and she thanked me for that. And I saw her mother about maybe 5 months ago, and she thanked me as well. Listen, I'm so grateful to have been a part of these kids' lives, and I'm here to hold space for them and their families. I'm rooting for them, and I know the evils of poverty. So did Dr. King, and I know that these kids can do better in spite of, right? But they need some radical adults who positively believe in them and their families' ability to do better with the right supports in place. So that's my very long answer.
Yes, thank you. It's very good long answer.
Thank you.
Yes.
I will lighten it up a bit and just ask, have you guys been watching Abbott Elementary School?
Oh my God, I love it.
Tell me, how close is it to what you know, and highlights, whatever you feel, go.
It is so on point. First of all, I'm a fan of Kenta Bunsen, the young woman who created it rather. And I've been following her career a long time. And she also is on a show called the Black Lady Sketch Show.
Yes, I remember her from that. Does that still come on?
Yeah. It should be probably coming up on season 3 in June. Remember,
there's like 4 or 5 of them in that, right? Yeah, it's like,
oh my goodness. And shout out to Issa Rae, because she was courageous enough to carve these inroads. It brought women on like Kenta Bunsen, right? And she got a production deal, and 2 other women on that show also got production deals as well, right? So shout out to Black women making way for other Black people, especially Black women, to have their talents amplified and showcased, right? So this is so on point. One episode, you remember the episode when she was teaching about the Philly vernacular?
Yeah.
I was like, I literally can't.
Yes. And it's so simple, and like people will laugh, but it's like, no. Like, this is how my students talk every day.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you don't know, they're speaking a whole other language to you if you ain't connected to that.
Yeah.
They're like, you Joe. I'm like, Joe? What is Joe? Like,
yeah.
You tweaking. Oh, okay. Am I tweaking? It's
great.
great.
I really love her. I love the janitor in the building. If that ain't a Philly janitor.
Oh my God, yes. Just the straight matter of fact. It's like,
right, you're like, listen, yo, we got a child trapped in the elevator right now. Can you please come with the emergency kit? I'm gonna be right there. Right there. Like, but he's in the elevator. Well, how did he get there? I don't know, but we need to get him out.
Yes. Love it.
And I'll tell you something else people don't realize if they've never taught elementary ed. They think it's all peaceful and uneventful. It is a lively bunch all day long.
All day. Like, what? The energy. It's just, yeah, I love the show. I think it's great. Every time I look, sometimes my wife is sitting here and I'm like, she's like, is that real? I'm like, it's so real. You have no idea how real that is. All the little stories I tell, I used to tell I would make a book called I Can't Make This Stuff Up. And I would tell that everywhere I go, like, these stories Like you just wouldn't believe it because you just think of a school as a little, little schoolhouse and kids are in line and doing what you say. No. That's just what they post on social media. That ain't the regular day.
It's lively all day. You literally cannot believe that they've managed to get into as much as they've managed to get into.
Yes.
And my school only went to the 4th grade, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We only went, so we had babies and we were
Right.
like, oh my God, what else is going on today?
Yep.
So, and another thing about Philly is the parking, right? So literally they'd be waiting for me and my principal, like, y'all know you late. We trying to get parking space. You're like, bro, I'm in a whole school all day.
Yeah.
I need to teach. This is more important than your parking space.
I had a teacher that was like, she moved the cone a little and someone told her, they were like, yo, you can't move the cone. She's like, well, the cone wasn't in the street, it was on the sidewalk. And I was like, well, you'll find out by the scratch that's on your car when you leave today, it's going to tell you, basically.
And they talked about that on Abbott Elementary too this week, right? The girl like parked in like the official second grade.
Right, but it's her spot, right?
Right. She's like, what are you talking about? It's unofficial, but official. It's my parking spot. You're like, man, if you don't. But it's so true. And I had to learn the lay of the land in terms of the parking.
Yep.
Right. Every street can be a little different.
Yes,
even.
it is. Yes, it is. So, all right, before we wrap up, I wanted both of you to give an opportunity to talk about the DEI work you've been doing. I know Randy has mentioned that you guys have gotten into that space. You both have gotten into that space, and just to give you a chance to promote what you're doing. So go ahead, let's talk about DEI and why we need it.
Well, the name of our company is going to be, because it's in production, Diverse Warriors. I will give Erica the credit for coming up with the name. You can see she's very, very pro-Black. And that's needed in this DEI space, because break in and we're going to bring something different and more powerful, more real to the diversity, equity, inclusion. Now they're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised how many websites we go on and see, white folks leading this charge. Mm-hmm. And they've not had the lived experience that we've all had. Right. And they never will. And that's the biggest difference. Mm. I don't care if you're married to someone of another race or whatever the situation is. If you have not lived it in your skin, then you really shouldn't be talking about it. So we're about to make a splash on all the big social media platforms, and we're very, very excited about it. Mm-hmm.
All right, Eric.
So for me, education has always been a way for me to be an activist, right? And I've always been an activist. So I push back in elementary school, I push back in middle and high school. I led a walkout in high school I'm very proud of. Yeah. And in college, I was writing letters to the dean about building a school for adult learners and giving feedback at the end of the semester about Black instructors that were needed and why it was needed. So I've always been that person. I wanted to be really clear about that, right? Because I've always been Black and I don't get to divorce my Blackness, right? And I don't get to put on the gone fishing sign, right? So I've always been an activist and an advocate, and education in particular has always been a form of activism for me. So that's one way that I actually look at it. So I'm really proud to be in the space authentically so. And I focus a lot on the belongingness, not just the diversity, equity, and inclusion, but the sense of belongingness, because I feel like there's a lot of room in there, right? When any of us think back to being in classrooms and only being acknowledged for chattel slavery and only being acknowledged, Dr. King in the month of February. Right. And having to fight for this man's birthday to become a federal holiday to only have cars and sheets sold on it now. Right. And so I remember all of these things along the way. So I feel like it was just a natural build, that life was just slowly just telling me like, girl, this is where you're supposed to have always been. You know what I mean? And this is literally work I've always done. I told you I did it all throughout my teaching, throughout my coaching. It's made a big difference in my life. It's made a difference in the lives of the people that I'm in service to. I believe very much in service. So with our organization, our small grassroots effort that's going to grow into a world-class platform, my Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Our effort is to show people they're not alone. And by people, I mean mostly Black people, because the root of all racism is anti-Black hate. Let's be clear about that, right? And so we want to come into those spaces and teach people ultimately about examining themselves, interrogating themselves and family, and assessing where they start at, where they're at rather. Because you want to be like really clear about it. All white people have been conditioned to supremacy, and they're on a spectrum. So why wouldn't it be needed, right? To come into a space and help you understand like why it is that you're dominating that space, why it is that you are in need of dismantling the space. If we're talking about Black teachers, it can't just, all the brunt can't be left up to Black teachers to do the fixing of a system, right? That is intentionally designed to fail us. We're coming in there teaching, disciplinarians, role models, right? So how can we possibly do all this work? Well, that's where Diverse Warriors comes in, right? And we want to help you build healthier, more equitable, culturally centered environments that are sane, that celebrate people and make everybody feel like they belong there.
Excellent. So I want to thank y'all for coming.
Ooh. I was like, ooh.
Thank you for a really, really rich conversation. Right.
Thank you, Mr. J. Kamal. Appreciate
So
you.
I'm gonna hold on a second. I'm gonna hit stop recording.